It's the 2025 season preview for the Port Adelaide Football Club coming your way. Stick around and enjoy. Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules YouTube channel. We've got another season preview for 2025 AFL season coming your way today. It's the Port Adelaide Power. We're going to be looking at everything Port Adelaide for 2025. How are they going to go? We're going to look at their list. We're going to look at how they've gone recently and all of that. If you haven't already, go back, check all the other teams. We're working through alphabetically. There's only like 5 or 6 to go. So we're getting towards the end. Obviously, they're all going to be out before opening round starts. So we're getting close. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to like, comment, let me know how Port Adelaide are going to go in 2025. And yeah, let's jump straight into this video. Let's go through all the information we've got. So last season, Port Adelaide actually had a pretty good year. They finished second on the ladder in the home and away season, went 16-7, finished up losing in a prelim final against Sydney. It was a weird season for them because Ken Hinkley was under pressure with about 8 to 10 weeks to go in the regular home and away season. And then all of a sudden they turned it on for the back half of the year, including like 100 and something point victory over Sydney, who were at that time sitting clear, like way clear on top of the ladder. So interesting finish to their year. They then made finals. They got absolutely smacked by Geelong in a home qualifying final, which was a terrible result for them. They followed it up with a narrow semi-final win against the Hawks before, I won't say getting smashed by Sydney, but convincingly enough. Like, they were never really in that game. I think they lost by about 5 or 6 goals in the end. But that was kind of the margin. From pretty early on, you could tell that was going to be the margin, and Port Adelaide never really made a run at all in that time. So a bit of a disappointing finish to their season, which promised a little bit at times. So we look at their last 5 years. They've had, on the most part, really successful 5 years. 4 out of those 5 years, they've finished the home and away season in the top 4. And 3 of those they've lost in a prelim final, with the other year losing in a semi. So 2020, they finished first on the ladder throughout the regular season, went 14-3, but couldn't get past the prelim final stage. They followed that up in 2021 with a second place finish, 17-5, ended up losing in a prelim final. They then had a down year in 2022 where they finished 11th, going 10-12. 2023, they bounced right back up. They finished third on the home and away on the ladder in the home and away season with a 17-6 record, so really good again. But once again, couldn't get going. Went out in straight sets, losing qualifying and then a semi-final. And then in 2024, they finished second on the ladder, as we said, 16-7, lost in a prelim. So 3 prelim final exits in the last 5 years. Including all 3 of those years finished top 2 on the ladder in the home and away season. So really good home and away team that just hasn't put it together in finals for quite a while now. Like, they haven't played in a grand final since 2007, but made quite a few prelim finals in that time. Been quite consistent over the years at making finals. They've made quite a lot of final series, but never really taken that next step when it comes to getting to a grand final and winning a premiership. So that's their big concern at the moment, is taking that next step. If you don't know already, most people should know by now, this will be Ken Hinkley's last year at the helm. They've already announced the succession plan. He's stepping down at the end of 2025, and Josh Carr is coming in to take over the mantle. So he's had a controversial tenure as coach. At times looks great, but at the end of the day, his tenure is going to basically be really good home and away team, not so good in finals. That's not exactly his fault, I don't think, but that's how it's going to be perceived. Unless he can turn it around this year, we'll see. I certainly wouldn't write them off for 2025 just yet. We'll now jump into the list that they've got going out onto the park. So this is as of about a few weeks ago, before any SSP. Don't know if they have any SSP players yet. I haven't actually properly looked. But this is how their players ranked last year in 2024. So Blue R Elite means they were in the top 10% of their position, as judged by me last season. Green is top 50% of their position. Yellow is everybody else that played. Red means they have never played a game of AFL football, and there are no orange for Port Adelaide, which are players that have played previously but did not play last year. So these are all my rankings. People will disagree, some will agree. It is an opinion-based sport. Let's be fair, everyone has a different opinion. But key defenders to start with, they've got three really solid ones. There's no doubt about it. Alir, Brendan Zirk, Thatcher, and Asava Radagalia, all well and truly good enough to be key backmen pretty much on any list. They did rotate a few Radagalia into the forward line at times last year. I don't think that's their best play overall. I think the idea is probably play all three most weeks. If the opposition doesn't have many tall forwards, then maybe you mix it up on those weeks. But I think those three will play most of the season. General defenders, they've got a couple okay ones here in Farrell and Miles Bergman, who they both played a little bit of wing, but mostly overall for the season were general defenders. Ryan Burton had a bit of a down year. Obviously, there was one more player that was above all of them last year in Dan Houston, who has left the club to go to Collingwood. So that kind of opens up that position, I guess, as being the number one ball user out of that back line. Pretty much it's a really high sought after role these days in football. Every club has at least one or two that they use as their elite ball users out of that back line that can run, carry it, but also hit targets with foot and open up the fast break opportunities by taking those risky kicks. Dan Houston has been great at it for Port Adelaide for multiple seasons now. So they kind of need to find that replacement. Who that is, I guess we'll kind of find out pretty early days, but they certainly have a lot of talent through their midfield. So maybe one of them drops back. Maybe it's a Farrell or a Bergman who steps up, or even Ryan Burton. Lockie Jones is certainly also good. Logan Evans is more than handy. Sin, Williams and Atkins, they're role players, I think, at this stage of their careers. So I think you'll see those three probably all improve slightly, as in Farrell, Bergman and Burton, and they'll need someone else to step up in that role as well down back, whether that's a Lockie Jones or a Logan Evans taking the next step, or it's somebody from their midfield dropping back, like an Ollie Wines playing more full-time half-back flank, who knows. Jumping into the key forwards for the Port Adelaide Power, we got a couple really solid options here. First of all, Mitch Georgiadis. He was ranked number 11 in my rankings for the season last year as a key forward. So not quite in the elite range, but he's someone that certainly could be in the elite range come 2025. Kicked quite a few goals in the end. He's certainly their best tall forward option. He's going to be in their team whenever fit. So he's, a really good player. Todd Marshall, solid numbers without being outstanding. Jeremy Finlayson, pretty similar. He's been a little bit down on what we would like to see, I think. And then Ollie Lord, I need to see a bit more of him before we get too much of a good picture on what he actually is capable of. And then Jack Whitlock was a highly sought after draft pick that they've picked up at a decent spot, in all honesty, Port Adelaide. So I don't think he's going to be ready to go this year. in 2025. If he does play this year, it's going to be more of a minor role. We won't see like an absolute superstar emerge this year, but he is someone that certainly in 3 to 4 years could be their number one key forward who could kick 50 plus goals in a season. I think he's really tall as well, so he could even pinch hit as a backup ruckman as well. Moving into their general forwards, I don't know what role they're going to use Lukosius in all honesty. First season this year, coming across from the Gold Coast. Overall, he was a general forward most of the time last year, but he also plays as a general defender at times. He plays as a key forward at times. He can play tall, he can play small. So he's kind of a very flexible option for them. What role they decide to go with him, whether that's a flexible role where sometimes he's running it out of backline, sometimes he's a target up forward. I don't know exactly. We'll have to wait and see. I guess mainly what they do in pre-season with him in the match sim and then the pre-season game, the official pre-season game. We haven't seen them yet at time of recording. They play this weekend some point. I can't remember exactly when, whether it's Friday night. I think they play Adelaide sometime. Anyway, so we'll be watching that and we'll get maybe a better picture on what they plan for him this year. Darcy Byrne-Jones has a really good year last year. There's no doubt about it. I don't think we'll see much more than what he produced last year. I feel like that's almost at his peak. But he's a really handy half-forward flank wingman sort of player that he can play multiple roles. He can kick goals at important times. And I think that's where he is. Willie Rioli is someone that, at his best, is certainly above a 38 ranked general forward. He can kick goals. He can change a game in a matter of moments. His final series was really good. I think he's a player that, could be someone that changes multiple games for Port Adelaide this year. Jackson Mead had a good season. We'll see a lot of him again this year. Then you're on to some more, I won't say speculative, but players that we don't know so much about based on last year. Joe Richards, obviously coming across from Collingwood, only played about 6 or 9 games, I can't remember. Kicked 2 handfuls of goals. He was quite handy. We haven't seen a lot of him as yet. How he fits into this Port Adelaide team, we'll see. Came across, obviously, in the trade with Gold Coast and Collingwood, and I wouldn't write him off as being someone that's just... they've gone after him, so they're not planning on him being a fringe player. They expect to see him playing a key part for their season, I would imagine. Sam Powell-Pepper obviously didn't play much last year. Started the season suspended, and then once he got into the team, he only played a few games before he had a season-ending injury. He'll be hoping to get a lot more games into him this year in 2025. We'll see how that plays out, but at his best, he is certainly going to be in this lineup and will be crucial in taking the next step for the club, I think. Jed McEntee, mainly a role player, I think, at this stage, and the 3 rookies there I don't think we'll see too much of. Jumping into their midfield lineup, this is where they have the most talent, I think. Most people would agree. Zach Butters started to start with an elite midfielder, no doubt about it. He was ranked 14th last year. I would expect he'll be ranked in the top 15 or so midfielders again this year. Jason Horne-Francis plays a little bit more forward time than most midfielders, which probably lowers his rank a little bit because there's times of games where he's not as involved as others. But he's still ranked 20th best midfielder last year. He had an outstanding season. He kicks goals. He gets clearances. He did play in the Indigenous All-Stars game last weekend and was really good in that. So I would expect to see a massive season from him. I would be very surprised if he's not ranked in the top 10 midfielders in 2025. I think he's going to have an absolutely outstanding season. Connor Rose dropped off a little bit last year, down to 41st best midfielder. I think he's certainly in the top 20 midfielders at his best, so they could well have three absolute dominant midfielders right there. William Drew had a really good season last year as well. A little bit underrated in this midfield, so I think if he takes another step, which is going to be hard with all this talent in this midfield lineup, but expect to see him do quite a bit. Ollie Wines, contested ball, he's a Brownlow medalist, and he was their fifth best midfielder according to me last year, and potentially will be lucky to be top 5 midfielder for them again. Maybe he is someone that can half-back flank, but he was always a contested player, so that'll be interesting. Jace Burgoyne had an outstanding season last year on the wing, so expect to see that from him again in 2025, maybe even improving. I mean, you should probably expect him to improve. He had an outstanding game against Hawthorn in the finals, so look for him to be really good. Travis Boak, getting towards the end, but at the moment he's more that 5th or 6th midfielder. Plays a bit of wing behind the ball a little bit, so we'll see how he plays this year. Will Lawrence obviously didn't play a heap last year, certainly wasn't in a really good position for him last year. We'll see a bit more of him, I think, in 2025, but there's a lot of good midfielders ahead of him on the depth chart. Jackson, Cochran, Barrett and Mararis. I don't know too much if we'll see too much of any of them, but we'll see how that plays out. They also have one of the more interesting ruck scenarios on their list in the AFL, in all honesty. They've got 3 ruckmen that are all capable. They're kind of like Essendon. Essendon are very similar in many regards, with multiple ruckmen, all kind of slightly different players, but all around about the same overall level. And it can be a little bit hard to decide who's their best options going forward. Jordan Sweet last year was their best overall ruckman according to my rankings, ranked 20th. Soldo 25, and Vicentini was 32. I think that's the order that they kind of go into this team. Jordan Sweet is their best option as their number 1 ruckman, Soldo 2nd and Vicentini 3rd, but at the same time I could see all 3 of them being their best ruckman this year, so I'm kind of sitting on the fence, I guess. It's going to be all about, I think they're all going to get opportunities through the pre-season and early season to fight for that position, so it's going to be whoever takes that position by the scruff of the neck through the pre-season games and then makes it into round 1 as their best ruckman and then cements that spot by playing good all season. Will someone be able to do that? I guess we'll see, but it's a role that if they can find someone that really cements that spot, turns into a really good player, it could be hugely beneficial for this Port Adelaide team because they have a dominant midfield. If they can have a dominant ruckman, or not even a dominant ruckman, just a above average high class ruckman in their team, that would be huge for them because they obviously have midfield sorted. There's no doubt about that. Their midfield sorted. I think their key defenders are, well, not the best in the league. I think they've got solid enough key defenders. Key forwards, once again, solid enough. Georgiadis, definitely good enough. Should be probably ranked elite at the end of this year, I would think. General forwards is pretty solid. So it's just that general defender line, what they do to replace Dan Houston and this ruck line that I think are the big queries. They've got plenty of green on this sheet, not a lot of blue. So that's their big thing. Like Dan Houston obviously was blue and left. So they need a couple more elite players, I think, based on to take that next step is basically where I'm thinking they're at. They've got, as I said, plenty of above average players. They just need a couple of those to step it up into that elite range. We'll now look at their best 22, according to me. So this was done a month ago. Things have probably changed in my mind and also in everybody's minds. But this is how I did it a month ago. So Lockie Jones, Alia and Asava Radagalia sitting in the full back line. Half back line of Kane Farrell, Brandon Sir Thatcher and Miles Bergman. So playing the three talls, playing the three smalls in that back line, I think that's probably their best option. Whether they move someone else back when I was mentioning their depth chart, we'll wait and see. But based on last year, this would be how they lined up. Midfield line, Jace Burgoyne, obviously wingman, Zach Butters and Jackson Mead. Then half-forward line, I've got Horn Francis there just because they're so good in the midfield. But in all honesty, he probably goes in for Ollie Wines as one of their best three midfielders. But Horn Francis in that forward line can still be really dangerous. Finlayson and Darcy Byrne-Jones. And then their full forward line, Sam Powell-Pepper, Mitch Georgiadis and Willie Rioli. Just ignore that typo on Willie's name. Followers, Jordan Sweet, I've put as their best ruckman at the moment going into the season. Ollie Wines, Connor Rose. And then interchange, Todd Marshall, Willem Drew, who is unlucky not to be in their starting lineup as well because he's an absolute dominant midfielder. Travis Boak and Jack Lukosius. Really solid 22 right there. Their emergencies is also pretty solid. Ivan Soldo is their backup ruckman, but also, I mentioned Dante Vicentini is also an option as a backup ruckman. Joe Richards come across from Collingwood. I think we'll see enough of him this year. It'll be interesting to see how he goes. Ryan Burton will play some backline, I reckon, halfback flanks at times. Rory Atkins maybe as well, and Logan Evans. So really, really good list. They just need a few of their players to take that next step and become a little bit more consistent in terms of across a full season to turn this team into a team that actually fully contends in finals. Because I know they finished second last year on the ladder in the home and away season, and they made it to a prelim final. Were there too many people, though, actually convinced that they were good enough for a premiership at many parts of last season? I don't reckon. I don't think they would have been able to compete with a Brisbane in a grand final if they had have been the two losing prelim final teams playing each other. They wouldn't have competed with a Geelong, I don't think. So I feel like they just need to find that next step, and in order to do that, they need some of these players to step up. I think Georgiadis is the number one that we expect to step up and go to that next level. But they probably need one of their three key defenders to step up as well and be top 10 key defender in 2025. And as I said, their main thing is their half-back line. Their running defenders, how they replace Dan Houston is going to be huge in terms of whether they have success in 2025 or not. Jumping into their next season. Their schedule for 2025. First game will be against Collingwood at the MCG. Collingwood do play opening round, so it'll be Collingwood's second game, whereas Port Adelaide's first. It will be Dan Houston's first game ever for Collingwood, and it's going to be up against Port Adelaide, so that will be interesting to see how that goes. MCG, Collingwood, it's going to be a tough start to their year, no doubt about it. Buys for them this year. Opening round, obviously they don't play then, and then round 12. Gather round will be Hawthorn at the Adelaide Oval, which will be a cracker. Replay of last year's semi-final in which Port Adelaide just got over the line. So that should be an absolute ripper of a game. The teams that they play twice in 2025 are Adelaide, Carlton, Fremantle, Geelong, Hawthorn and Sydney. So obviously Sydney played in the grand final last year. Then you got a prelim final team in Geelong. Then you got a team that lost in the semi-final in Hawthorn and a team that lost in the elimination final in Carlton. So 4 finals teams. One that basically got eliminated every week of the final series. So not going to be the easiest season for them. They've got Fremantle are expected to go up as well. So this is looking like a pretty tough schedule, in all honesty, for Port Adelaide. And then they've got Adelaide twice, obviously, who also are a team that plenty of people can see improving in 2025. I personally, looking at that, would say that's one of the harder schedules in the AFL for 2025. There's no easy draw, let's be honest. Last year, all but 3 teams were really, really competitive most of the season. So there's no easy draw, but I would say this is one of the harder draws based on last year's results. Will they overcome that? I'm not sure. I think, based on what I think of Port Adelaide right now, I think of the top 8 teams, they're the most likely to just fall off the planet, in my opinion. Whether that is what happens or not, we'll see. A lot's going to come down to luck, but if I was to pick a team from the top 8 last year to just fall out of the sky and be terrible this year, Port Adelaide are possibly that team. Jump in the comments below. Let me know what you think of Port Adelaide. Am I completely wrong there? Are Port Adelaide going to finally challenge for a premiership? Let me know. Don't forget, we've got more videos coming out next week. The podcast goes to 2 episodes a week next week. It goes out on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, so go check that out. All Aussie Rules everywhere, social media. We've got 5 season previews to go, so stick around for them. There's still plenty more on the channel. Go check that all out. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.